Because there are things that technology cannot yet do for you. The human tech.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today on the 31st of July. We are this time actually on the panel. We have Pedro Heredia. Pedro, can you hear us here?
Hola, buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Ignacio.
Okay, Michael sent us an email saying basically he was busy and he couldn't make it. So we're going to face the subject today about buying to let. We're going to talk about the due diligence, the conveyancing, legal tips for you to take into consideration before investing, community bylaws and touristic license, different type of rental contract, expenses and taxes. Is it really worth it, Pedro? That will be one of the questions. And please send us your questions now, and please let us know where you are contacting us from, because we need to advise whether you will have one side or the other. For example, whether you're resident, you're non-resident, or etc., etc., etc. We're going to start. Pedro is going to start now sharing with us the three type of models we have in Spain. Well, first of all, we could talk about the due diligence that we're going to do for clients. When a client, Pedro, starts saying, I want to buy a property to let, pretty much what are all the legal tips we will give when we do the conveyancing. How can we take it further? Pedro, over to you.
Okay, Ignacio. Well, let's talk about not just being a monologue. Is like let's discuss about this when clients come to our law firm. In order to invest, in order to buy a property, sometimes they buy a property to live, and sometimes they buy a property to live, and also as well they buy some apartments to let as an investment. Okay, so what we an apartment or a villa, or I mean just as an investment, or they create like Airbnb, to rent it into Airbnb, or making like a small hotel. Well, what we say always on the due diligence to clients is that obviously we ask what intention do you do with you have with the property. Are you going to let it? Are you going to rent it? Are you going to advert in the Airbnb? Or do you want to do something extra in the property, like extending a property in a new room or new floor, or making a swimming pool, or whatever is needed? We need to know what is the intention of the client. In this specific issue is regarding someone who wants to buy in order to let, because at the end in Spain is big business. Many people is doing it. We're talking about long-term contracts that may have an average rate 7% profit. But those ones who are, for example, Airbnb, I'm sure that is a lot more. Talking about maybe 13, 14, 15, 20%, probably. Many of them. Some other ones not, obviously. I mean, this is an average that probably could be seen in the internet. But so in the due diligence, Ignacio, when we do, apart from all the general due diligence, like identification of the property, identification of the sellers, the property is free of charges and encumbrances, all the identification in catastrophe office, there are many due diligence that we need to do. Also, we inform the municipality in order to now a report, on planning report, in order to say there is no file against that property, there is no fines against that property, council tax is duly paid, rubbish collection is duly paid, electric and water is duly paid, about the mortgage, about any encumbrances that may happen in the property, or about the boundaries. I mean, we make a full due diligence on the property. Obviously, it depends if it's an apartment, if it's let's say very close to the sea, or it's a country villa, or is just an urban apartment flat that is in the main center of a city, for example. Obviously, the due diligence may vary in terms of where the property is, and what is the conditions, and what is the description, and what is the area where the property is. So, and this is important because this time, obviously, Spain, and we were speaking about that before, opened some years ago in order to attract more tourists in order to as a big demand, because it was not enough offer with hotels in many areas. In many areas, it was not enough offer to the demand that we were having. So it was a flexibility in rules in order to open and give licenses to apartments, to flats, villas, in order to attract, to make business in order to attract. Obviously, there's a big demand. It's going to increase the demand, as he's saying by the statistics, I saying by the public offices, tourist offices in Spain. And obviously, the municipalities are getting, well, in some way, looking at the future to see when they need to put some limits in order not to increase too much the licenses, because it's creating, well, in some times, in some cities, like we have to focus in this case, I'm talking about Madrid and Barcelona, and some other big cities, probably in some ways, some problems. But these models that Ignacio is saying is 3 models. Obviously, when you buy a property and you want to rent it, you could rent it for a long-term contract. I mean, you just find a real estate agent, or you do it by yourself, and you rent, you look for a tenant, and then you rent it by a long-term contract where the property is going to be a permanent home of a tenant. And then you could do it also in a way that has always been done with some agents, that issue a short period contract. We call it the contrato de temporada. It's like a temporary contract. It could be for holidays for the tenant. It could be for other reasons like job. For example, someone is moving some weeks or some months. Those ones, long-term and short-term, do not need a touristic license. Obviously, those, in order to look for the clients, in order to look for the tenants, you will not advert. You will not give a service similar to a hotel with a clean and you will just rent the property in a way that is being done always like that. And then is the third scenario, when the municipalities, they put some rules in order to say, well, this kind of property, this kind of villa, this kind of area in the city could be available to apply for a license, a touristic license. And then that specific, obviously, a scenario needs to be checked in the municipality rules, needs to be checked in the region rules, in order to know if that specific property could be entitled to apply for a touristic license. So if someone wants to buy a property in order to rent it in Airbnb platform, for example, first thing that you need to do is contract an independent lawyer and instruct your lawyer and inform your lawyer that this is your intention, because obviously they are going to focus not just in the general terms, also focus on that. I mean, because if the property that you intend to buy to let in these situations do not fulfill the requirements to get a license, well, why to invest in this case? Ignacio, and this is what really are the 3 scenarios. Long-term contract, we will speak about taxes day later, but this is the issue on the scenarios. As we've been speaking about that before, in temporary contract, like short period contract with agents, it's been done, I think, in the last 40 years. It's something common, similar to our long-term, but long-term, the tenant involves that it gets some rights on, is it a permanent home, and it gets some rights on being able, even though the contract is 1 year or 11 months, because many estate agents say that, even though it's 11 months or 1 year, it allows them to stay at least 5 years, obviously paying the rent. If they do not pay the rent, then you are entitled as a landlord to keep them out with a out-of-court legal notification, and they leave voluntary, or you do it through the courts. Okay, and we means long time. I'm seeing right now when I question long-term or long-time contract. This long-term contract is those who at the end a tenant establish the property as a permanent home. Permanent home means that you're going to live at the end. When it's more than a year, it shows that you are living in more than a permanent home. But many agents say, okay, let's put the contract 11. There's a tricky point, which it doesn't work. They say, let's put an 11 months contract, so it doesn't work for a 1 year contract, and it doesn't have a right to renew. That's not correct. Okay, so when the tenant establishes the home as a permanent home, then they get the rights. Okay,
Right, Pedro, well, let's recap for a minute. Okay, Pedro spoke about the long-term rental contract, which normally will take more than 12 months. That was one of the questions. Pedro spoke about short-term rental contract, which is a seasonal, so it could be a temporary one. And Pedro, you spoke about touristic as well, which means doing the publicity on the internet, promoting the service like a hotel, basically, or like the key of the point is short-term, probably days, 1 week, 2 weeks, but with certain platform publicity that allows, like, for example, they're using Booking, Airbnb, or any other platform. Now, let me just tell you a little bit. When you buy a property in Spain, buying a property in Spain is safe, but I highly recommend you to have an independent lawyer to look after your interests. If the purpose of the purchase is buy to let, then it's important that the lawyer goes and do all the due diligence, check in the town hall whether this is compatible or not, check on the bylaws of the community whether they're going to allow you to do this activity or not. Actually, the laws change often, and then you need to be kept up to date. For example, now in certain communities are going to be paying these people 20% extra of the normal fee they're paying on a monthly basis because they are doing an activity. So all these things you need to bear in mind. But as Pedro said, there are 3 types of models: the touristic, the short-term, and the long-term. The long-term rental contract, you will have much more rights as a tenant. So you will stay in the property, and you can stay up to 5 years, or even more if the landlord is a company. Short-term could be from 1 month, basically, up to 12 months, or because it's not your habitual or permanent home. And the touristic, we could be talking about weeks, okay, 1, 2, 3 weeks, but nothing, not a long-term rental contract. Now, things for you to bear in mind when you do the due diligence with your lawyer. Obviously, I will highly recommend you to do check the bylaws of the community, very important point, and whether it's compatible or not to turn that property into a rental property. With regards to the contracts, long-term contract is one type with one writing by laws. Short-term in the civil code and in the applicable law is a different one. So it is more towards the landlord. And touristic is more is easier for the landlord because ins and out is easier. The eviction order, anyway, in all 3 types of models could be done. I heard that you've been talking about squatters. Well, squatters could happen in any property. In general, we did cover that in our last webinar and encourage you to watch it. But even though there is news on the press, I wouldn't be too much worry on squatters in 2 cases. 1, if you have an alarm system. 2, if you are renting here and somebody decides to stay, there is a way to evict the tenant. Okay. Now, how fast it's going to go, it will depend on the court where you are heading and where your property is in. Okay, but definitely they will be out. Okay. Now, and this is one of the questions that we were having by Rachel. How difficult is to get them out? Well, actually, shouldn't be difficult, and through the court shouldn't be difficult neither. But I don't know how the tenant wants to fight it, and I don't know where are you contacting us from, Rachel, because depending on the court that you're heading, they could be overwhelmed or not. Okay, so the timing on every court will be different. Shouldn't be much, but the tenant could make it difficult. So is it possible to evict them? Yes. How fast? Nobody could tell you how fast it's going to be, because it will depend on how fast is the court doing all this and the tenant, even if they're contesting or not. Okay. Now, I will say something here as well. Depending on the type of contract you rent, I don't know if you're renting. If you don't have a contract, then definitely you need to go through the courts or just ask them to leave, and that will be it. If we're talking about short-term contract, you will probably put a clause there with a penalty clause. Okay, that's quite common. If you just remain in the property, your compensation fee will be double, right, or triple. This is quite normal practice in Spain to put that clause if they are in breach of contract. Now, if you are a long-term rental contract, then depending on the reason of breach of contract, whether it's lack of payment or whether it's breach of contract, again, it will depend on what you agree in the contract. That's why it's very important, Pedro, to have a very nice contract where everything is set out. A lot of people use just probably some forms from the websites or from Google or something. I think that's a big mistake, because this is pretty much what you really need to have: a nice contract protecting yourself and everything, just in case of breach of contract. Okay. Now, so going back to summarizing, buying a property is safe. Doing the due diligence through your lawyer is important. Trying to instruct the lawyer to do the due diligence before you commit yourself to the purchase. So it's important you know that what type of model you're going to use. And 3, once you have all these things, we could talk about the tax scenarios. Long-term rental properties, you've got big allowance, so you'll be taxed only on your 40% of the net on your regular income tax return. In the short-term contract, you don't have that allowance, so it's income minus expenses on the term that you've rent out, and you don't have any allowance, and touristic neither. Pedro was saying that the non-tax payer, non-tax residents, there is 2 types here: 24% for the non-European non-tax payers, which is from the gross amount, and 19% from the non-tax resident, European non-tax resident of the net. Okay, so there's 2. Obviously, you will have to,
It's important, as you said, Ignacio, important that the criteria is not the passport or the citizenship, is where you live, is where you are resident. If you are resident in a non-European country, if you are, even though you are Spanish or French, but you're living, for example, in the United States or in UK, for example, you have a property in Spain, you are non-resident in Spain, you live in US or UK, and it doesn't matter if you are a non-European Union citizen or you are European Union citizen or Spanish, you will be paying 24% gross. But if you live in a European Union country, then will be benefits will come will be 19% of a net amount. Okay.
Okay. Right, Pedro. So we cover buying a property in Spain, what to look for when you do purchase the property. Obviously, you need to analyze whether it's a good investment or not.
Yeah.
If you buy cheap, definitely it's good. Okay.
Exactly. Always. I mean, one of the big points about property market, I'm going to say something that everyone do not know, but it is something extremely important to buy cheap, obviously. At the end, even though this kind of investment is a long-term investment, in order to get profit in the future, obviously, as better as you buy, as better as you, obviously, the investment is better, obviously.
So the number 1 advice is buy cheap for a good price or bargain. Okay, well, this will be great. Then the second tip we will say is choose the model that suits you best, and try to have an appointment with your lawyer about what is best for you, depending on your personal circumstances and what legal and tax implication has that to you. We talk about the non-resident as European and non-resident as non-European, okay, or renting as a resident. Is 3 different tax scenarios for you to look at, okay, and the 3 of them are different. Okay, so it's important for you to think what tax scenario you will be in, what type of rental contract is the best for you, because the 3 work, and is a very personal decision, an investment decision. We didn't talk here, Pedro, what you did discuss on the radio, which was about buying as a property and trying to recover the VAT if they
Yes.
sell on to you with the VAT. So probably, I don't know if you want to explain a bit more the
Exactly.
selling with the company.
We've been saying, just to briefly summarize, those ones who are living in a country which is non-European country, residents there are having a property, investing in a property. So in that terms, they are non-residents in Spain, but are getting profit from Spain. It will be 24% gross amount, and those ones who are living in the European Union country will be 19% of the net amount. So income minus costs added to the costs on the property, and then minus that would be 19%. So the net amount is 19%. Those ones, everyone non-resident, non-European Union, European Union, Spanish, if they are residents in Spain, then, as Ignacio said, depends if you rent it in a long-term or a short-term or touristic license, and there would be some issues about some allowance or not. Obviously, the long-term, as has been said, you get a reduction on 60% of the base to be taxed, and then is the net amount on the difference. So, which is normally is very good. And what we Ignacio has said appeared right now said it is regarding if you invest in a new property. When you buy a property in Spain, it could be obviously in like every all the countries you buy a new properties or second-hand properties. New properties in Spain has a different tax concept, which is a value-added tax, which is 10%. Well, actually, it's 10% plus stamp tax. It has difference between regions, but value-added tax is the same one in all of Spain, which is 10%. Is value-added tax. If you buy a second used property, a resale company property, then will be a different tax. In Valencia region, where we are, is also 10%. In other regions, depends. Sometimes it's 8, it was 7, sometimes it's, I don't know, depending on 9 or 10, depending on the region and depending on the concept. But those ones who are new properties and you buy 10%, by you buy it just for letting in order to get profit, in order to let's say that the what is activity on property, and you leave this property to some company in order to get some profit of that property, then you have a right to recover the value-added tax. Recover the full amount of the value-added tax that you have paid, so it's 10%. And obviously, if you keep the property 10 years, and if you do not keep the property 10 years because you need to sell it, let's say in the year number 6 from where you bought it, then you need to recover back and pay back to the tax office the other, let's say 40% of the value tax that you receive back. It's a prorate calculation, a very easy calculation. But you have a right to apply back that money. You just get a fee paid by the company that you leave the property to rent it out. And that's briefly, obviously, that's a good option for those ones who just want to invest and get some profit on that. Obviously, the properties that they need to invest in that kind of situations normally are investments that they have very attractive on touristic license or very attractive on long-term contracts where there is a lot of demand on the area. So those ones who do that, that is, in my opinion, is good business also. Recovering that, obviously, you make an invoice, you receive value tax, you pay to tax office, but you need to update it in the tax office, obviously, in this case, as an economic activity, and pay value tax and receive value tax in this case at the beginning.
Yeah, Pedro, this will be pretty much like acting like a hotel. So you are deducting the VAT, but you are collecting VAT. So when you rent it out, you are just charging VAT to the tenant. So it's a company.
That's right. This case is obviously the service that you do when you do it with a company. Like, you just receive a payment agreed with a value tax, and you need to pay value tax to the tax office. Obviously, you have already paid back that value tax at the beginning. Well, actually, whenever you make application, will be the following year, in the first month of the following year, to receive back this 10% value-added tax. But it's a good business in order to do it, because normally it's a lot of money. But if you invest, for example, in an apartment of 350,000 euros, it's 35,000 euros back. And increase the costs of accountancy. Obviously, there needs to be done more effort on accountancy, even though it's still simple. You need to be updated and submit some models every 3 months and then a year, and the income tax declaration you need to do, obviously, as a resident or non-resident. You will be able to do it anyway in that case. But we just put it on the table. Yes, it's an option. We have some clients that have done it, but also the other part is like, okay, you do not act like an activity because you want to use that property sometimes. So imagine that someone want to invest, want to advert in the Airbnb and a tourist selection, but sometimes they want to go on the property and enjoy it. That's also.
I think this is another decision, Pedro, because if you're buying a property just as an individual, then we should be looking into all the taxes scenario eventually as well, inheritance taxes, and the running cost of running a business like that as one property, 2 properties. But probably if you want to set up your own business about this model of business, probably you could set up a company and then start doing the business through the company. And then you need to claim, you need to pay the VAT, if there is VAT on the vendor, because not everybody is buying a brand new property. So you need to find out that the vendor will give you an invoice. And normally, as Pedro said, is a brand new property. Second, you need to charge the tenants the VAT as a company. And 3, you need to do quarterly accounts and tax forms properly, etc., etc. And obviously, is a different type of model. If you are just interested about one property, I would probably not recommend to set up a company because of the cost involved on the whole transaction. But you really need to analyze with your lawyer or your tax advisor what is the best tax scenario for you. I really think, Pedro, is all about personal circumstances and the focus on the business. So that's important.
Yeah.
Pedro, would you like
I'm just
to
reading right now one of the questions regarding you've said about the companies. Also, many clients ask to us, okay, well, can I buy a property with a limited company in Spanish? Obviously, yes. We do not recommend until we have this criteria you've said, unless we make a simulation. We understand that one property not for sure, normally not, and whenever it's like 2, 3, 4 investment, let's say, and then we start maybe recommending to do it in a limited company. Doing as a non-resident, as if he's a resident in a European Union country, as 19% of a net amount, is extremely good. It's good. It's fantastic. If you do it with a limited company in Spain, it's 25%, and you have accountancy costs, tax costs. So at the end, it's much higher cost, really, if you do it with a limited company, unless you have a big profit and you do this an activity and a business. And then we always recommend to do it with a company. And what if you buy a property with a non-resident company, let's say a UK company, a Polish or a Netherlands company? What happens with the taxes? If you get a profit on a property in Spain, whether you are resident or non-resident, if you, in this case, you are non-resident because the company, which is not a Spanish company, is a foreign company, then we have to be paid taxes in Spain accordingly to the double taxation treaties and accordingly to, obviously, to the non-resident rules. If the property is in Spain, you pay tax accordingly to these rules. What we say, 24% gross or 19% net, depending on where the residency is about individuals or company, and then you will deduct that taxes in the home country where you are based. So this is how it works in order to avoid double taxation. You pay taxes here, and then you imagine that you have to pay taxes in Spain, 20 euros, and then you have to pay in the UK 100. Then will be 100 minus 20. Well, at the end, you're in UK, you will pay 80. And this is how it works, the double taxation, in order to avoid. In the country where the property is, you must pay taxes accordingly to the rules of the country where the property is. And that's one of the key points. Okay.
Okay,
And
Pedro, I don't know, shall we start with questions and answers? We've got the question from Jeff, which I think is quite interesting. And I think, Pedro, you've been dealing this with an actual client of ours, some people trying to rent their properties, long-term clients, but he wants to keep the August month free, obviously to cover July and August. And, because it brings good money, and then the rest of the year they have a lower, right? I wouldn't call it long-term rental if you're stopping in July and August, Pedro, but I remember you mentioning that you're doing a long-term contract with X amount of money for certain months, and when you go and hit July and August, if he doesn't leave, it will be a different price. Okay, I think that's completely legal, Pedro. I think
yes,
that's very good
absolutely.
advice.
Yeah, see some issues that we as lawyers we manage to protect whoever is the client, if it's the landlord or if it's the tenant. A landlord is a question that is made a lot in those areas that in summertime they can get like 4 times the same income. Well, they say, okay, well, I would like the tenant to leave in June, and I would like we'll come back in September, let's say something like that. And they agree on that. They really agree on that. No worries, I will leave on June, I will go. But on long-term contract, as I said, and when the property is your permanent home, and that's the intention, and you actually prove that it's your permanent home, I always say that the tenant has the right to stay there, obviously paying the rent, and has the right to live up to 5 years, really, even though the contract is 6 months or 11 months or 12 months, whatever it is. So in order to avoid sometimes this is as an agreement, as a consent agreement, is okay, well, perfect, this is the contract, this is a 12-month contract. This month, from January to June, it's 500 euros, but let's say July and August is 3,000 euros per month. And then and in total amount is everything is like 3,000 euros plus the rest of the 500 euros per month. And then with some condition, it says if you leave in June, then you will not have to pay July, you will not have to pay August. But if not, you stay, no problem, you will pay to me, and you have the right to stay. But the agreement is a total amount per year, and we manage to say which are the months if you stay or not. Then will be okay, and you will not have to pay as an agreement. This must be always an agreement, consent agreement, voluntary agreement by tenant and landlord. But obviously there are some tricky points in order to manage with that, because it's been a lot of, I would say, unknowledge of agents or even lawyers and tenants. I mean, in saying that okay, do it in a way that 11 months and then it doesn't count as a permanent home. That is not true. Be sure that you are well advised, and as a landlord, and obviously as a tenant, you have rights. If it's a long-term contract, and obviously we're talking about, I mean, today we will not speak about, unless someone asks, about rental rules, about the guarantees, about the penalties, about, I mean, there are some issues on the contracts and rental contracts that need to be checked, and as an inventory and the insurance, and there are many issues that need to be checked on a rental contract whenever it's a great long-term contract. And with the touristic license, obviously you need to fulfill the requirements of a municipality. I mean, about square meters, about the emergency maps, about obviously to this kind of outlet, it needs to have some guarantees about the cleaning. You need to have everything ready whenever they come. It's like it's in some way not like a hotel, but similar. And but it is something that obviously is in Spain. It happens a lot, and the landlords they want to get profits, long-term contract, but whenever summertime comes, they want to get a lot more. Which unless it's agreed, this doesn't work.
But Pedro, then probably the way we are saying here, we could do January to December contract with a set price, but if you leave July and August, you knock down the price. And that's only a contract about price, isn't it? I don't see any problem with regards to that. I mean, you in Spain, you could rent out long-term rental, and nobody could tell you anything about the price, and nobody could tell you neither any discount about the seasons. Correct, Pedro?
No. Exactly. It's a voluntary agreement.
It is important, Pedro, to draw it up properly, the contract, because otherwise it's a can of worms. If you just do most of the problem I face when we have a client with regards to rental agreements is that contracts, Pedro, normally are in general not very good.
Yeah, that's right. They're very standard, very just like a template sometimes is, and obviously in many occasions needs to be some accuracy on terms of in order to protect. There are some paragraphs that needs to be included, and that's for sure. Yeah, I think it's important to do that in order to protect, because what we do always, Ignacio, you myself, because we are barristers, and we discuss this in the court every single week, and obviously we know the scenario when at the beginning and at the end, what could happen, if it's not prevented at the beginning, could happen and could end it in a court proceeding, which our clients do not want, we don't want, and we want to protect the clients in order to avoid that situations, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, actually, well, the first advice, Jeff, here is yes, it's possible what you're saying, but as I said to you and all the audience, is make sure you have a good contract that is really protecting you. That's basically. Now, Pedro, Jeff has another question, which I don't know if the audience will have the same case, but they run it through an English company. So a lot of people, I don't know if it's the case, they have an English company who's the owner of another Spanish company and rent it out. I think in his case is the English company, the ones that rents out the property in Spain. So they bought it and the English company. What will you say here? Well, to be honest, I mean, if it's already been bought that way, it is what it is, okay? I don't think for only one property it might be worth it unless your accountant in the UK says it's beneficial for them. Here in Spain, the non-resident tax, because that company, Pedro, probably is a non-resident, is a company that is established in the UK, and here in Spain, it's got a SIF code.
Non-resident tax, that's right. It's
non-resident tax.
It's like,
and probably here, Pedro, is 24% as well, because it's a non-European, non-resident in Spain. 24%.
Exactly. In this case, I mean, because the change,
it's not efficient.
I don't know. I mean, he bought it in 2013, so obviously the rules have changed. Now it's not. Even though he bought it in an individual way, it would be the same if he is resident in the UK. If the someone who is asking that will be really resident in Spain, that would be could have been done in a way that the properties are individual in his name or her name, and will be a lot more benefits in this case. Let me just read the question, but obviously I think I answered this before. In general, is if you have a property and you get income from properties, even though you buy it with a non-resident UK company in this case, you pay taxes in Spain anyway, 24%. That's for sure. And then you deduct whatever is being paid in the UK. You deduct in the UK whatever is being paid in Spain. That is how it works, the double taxation treaty, in this case between Spain and UK.
So just to refresh here, Pedro, non-European tax resident, so non-European non-tax resident will pay 24% of the gross amount. It doesn't matter whether you have a mortgage and you pay interest. It doesn't matter whether you pay community fees, cleaners, or whatever. You're paying 24% of the gross figure every quarter based on the days you rent out. If you're a European non-tax resident, it is much more beneficial. Why? Because it's 19% of the net. That means income minus expenses, and the expenses will count the interest of the mortgage, the water, the electric, the community fee, the insurance, everything related to property, community fees, etc., etc. And if you are a tax resident in Spain, as Pedro said, it doesn't matter what nationality you are. If you are more than 183 days in Spain, and if it's only one property or 10 properties, but you rent them out long-term rental, I think Marilena is getting confused here. What is taxable? is only on 40% of the net. That means income minus expenses. What expenses we're talking about? The water, electric, or whatever that you include in the contract. Normally in the long-term rental contract, you don't include that many things. You include EB for the rates. You could include the annual insurance if it's down to you for the content, and community fees, and a few bits and bobs here. But whatever net figure you get, 40% of the net is taxable. What tax do I pay on that? That depends on your marginal rate. Why? Because it's based on your income. So income from work, income from interest, income from property, and then you will have a X amount from 15% to 48% depending on your income. As Pedro said, we could always do a tax simulation of a specific scenario. And that's what I really recommend everyone who might be having questions, because we could be talking about general here to give you some ideas, but for the specific tax that you're going to pay, we need to have, and we need you to disclose all your income, and then we're able through our accountant to do the tax return for you if you were to lodge that figure. Okay.
Okay. I'm reading some questions that I would like to. I think we're going to have time.
Okay, go ahead.
Answer some of them, and I'll be rapid in order to.
Yeah.
But some of them are very interesting. One of them is made by Tamara. Thank you, Tamara, for this question. It says, if you have a tourist license and the community allows short-term rentals, can the committee ban tourists using the pool? Committee ban tourists, I understand, is a tenant using the pool. Well, first of all, the community, unless the community of owners 100% has agreed, as all of them, 100% of the owners has agreed in order to reject to have touristic apartments or flats in the building, unless it's done that, it cannot be done. It cannot be done. Cannot be rejected, those short-term rentals. So the community can just allow to have touristic properties unless it's been agreed by everyone. Everyone, I means everyone, 100%. What they could do, community, I think I could answer some other questions in this case. What the communities of owners, and this is some changes has been done on the rules, they could agree 3/5 of the owners of that community of owners, they could agree to increase the costs of a community of owners 20% to those properties that are using the flat or the apartment or the villa. In this case, a flat or apartment is a community of owners, but it could be also a bungalow for touristic business and touristic business. So can increase to maximum 20%, cannot reject unless it's approved by everyone. And the answer to can the tenants that are using these apartments, flats, use the swimming pool? The answer is yes. Okay, and question by Art. Thank you, Art, for the question. It says, if you get a mortgage in Spain from a Spanish bank to buy a property, well, it's something that we've been speaking about that. Obviously, for non-residents to want to invest, they could get a mortgage, 50-60%, depends obviously on the risk on the banks. The question is, can you deduct the mortgage from profit gained from that property let and treat it as an expense? No, you just can include interests from the mortgage, but not the principal of the mortgage. You could also include a depreciation. You could also include all the costs that you have, but accordingly to the days that you are rented. Imagine that you have, because you have costs every year, council tax, you have a depreciation, but maybe you rented just 103 days. Then we need to make a prorate amount in order to include it as 103 days that you rented it. Insurance, for example, costs that you have on the property related to the rent. Okay, but another question by Chris is, in a long-term contract, what happens if the owner dies? And what is the impact on those inheriting? Okay, if a problem really arises, obviously when the tenant, and then there's a family or there's a couple, obviously when the tenant dies, but in this case, the question is about the owner. I mean, if the owner dies, obviously there's open an inheritance process. The tenant keeps the rights by the contract that has. If it has a long-term contract, we have a period of time until the end of the contract. If it has a touristic license, whatever that specific contract will allow the tenant to stay, even though the landlord is alive or not. Because when the landlord dies, there are other landlords in a process and transition, which are the beneficiaries, even though it's unknown. Those beneficiaries at that time, because maybe there's a dispute, or maybe there is no clear on the beneficiaries. Or obviously in Spain, when someone dies, it's open inheritance process, which may take short time, but it may take years sometimes. So it's open and inheritance, obviously proceeding the impact, and obviously the tenant will keep paying to the account that is paying always, and whenever he's informed about the situation, and whenever he's informed about who are the beneficiaries, is obviously to pay them, accordingly, as a different, whoever is the percentage or whoever is the beneficiary. Okay, there is another question. It says, as a primary residence, this is done by Marilena, new construction, would I be able to get back at least 40% of the value at tax? I know that value at tax in the country is 10%. As a primary residence, no. We're talking about if you buy a property and you live it and you don't use it. It's not your permanent home, it's your residence, you don't even use it. Primary resident, I understand, is a resident that you want to use it as a permanent home. You are not able to get back this 40% of the value at tax. And he's right.
Pedro, I think she got confused with the income tax return, with the 40% of the net.
Exactly. It's right that the value at tax in Alicante is 10%. Well, it's in all Spain, really. Okay.
But I think, Mariela, we got confused. The 40% of the net is what's taxable. If you are a company, you could claim back the VAT, but the full amount, not just the 40%, but that's as a company. You need to bear in mind, one thing is individual, one thing is company, one thing is resident, one thing is non-resident, and one thing is non-resident as a non-European or non-resident as a European. So these are the scenarios for you to look at. Okay. Pedro, what is the next question that we have here? Do you want to take it on? There is one that goes
go ahead.
The golden visa as well. Well, the problem with the golden visa here, Pedro, if they bought, apparently someone bought a property already before obviously some time. Okay,
before the starting law date in 2013. Probably.
The problem is he bought it with a company.
Cannot be included in golden visa. That's right.
Right, but I think you have done one golden visa with a company if one of the directors have all the shares. Is that correct, Pedro? Could you explain the situation that you dealt with?
It could be applied a golden visa once you are the owners of a majority of the shares, even though it's a Spanish or non-Spanish company, majority of the shares. And also you need to obviously prove that you have a capability as a shareholder, as a major shareholder, to instruct, to choose and to remove the directors of the company. So that's the rule. You need to have a majority of the shares that also is combined gives you power in order to choose and remove the director of the company. Obviously, this means that you are really the owner of the company, and this means that at the end you are the owners of the properties, even though the percentage is not 100%. And you can buy properties through a company and apply for golden visa. The answer is yes. Obviously, you need to be in this case the director of the company, and well, at the end you apply for that. Important issue. As I think you've said that if the properties have been bought before the 2013, before it's let's say October 2013, cannot be included in that case. So let me just find this question. There are some dozens of questions right now. Let me find this one that you said. I think it was in the beginning. Okay, it says, I am named by director, perfect, but if I purchase another one, will I have to take the investment out of the company to obtain the visa and does this to the property? No, you just, even though those properties are included in the company, you can buy another one in the company, and just in the application is just submitted with the property that is bought after 2013 and the new property that which is bought, for example, this year in 2022-24.
But Pedro, this is very delicate. This procedure, because they already have a company, they need to buy now, and the golden visa procedure now, we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So
This is
very important they do it properly.
Yeah, I think it's also said, I mean, because obviously we are in a period of time that, well, we may see the light on the final tunnel, because it looks like it's going to be eliminated in the future. Yeah. Probably next year.
So for those who are interested to do the golden visa, the sooner you do, the better, and pretty much hurry up, because we really don't know whether they're going to remove just the property investment and we're going to carry on with the rest of the investments, but that's €1 million instead of 500,000 euros on property. We really don't know whether it's going to be eliminated, the whole golden visa. But again, as I said to you before, the golden visa is one option. You could still do the non-lucrative visa, the nomad visa, which you could be very efficient as well. The nomad visa for those of you who are working remotely for your abroad company, a company that you are not the owner, and they allow you to work remotely. This is a very interesting from a tax point of view, because you will only pay 24% of your salary in Spain, up to 600,000 euros. So from a tax point of view, the nomad visa and working remotely for a abroad company, for an international company, register in Spain is the most efficient way if you're an expert trying to move to Spain. Golden visa, we don't know, is still in process. So hurry up for those of you who are really thinking about it. But there are options like non-lucrative visa. Now, important for those of you who are buying a property in Spain, buy to let investment. Again, make sure you do the due diligence. Don't try to find an independent lawyer that looks after your interests with regards to this. One is whether they will allow you to give you a license. Two, to analyze the bylaws and the statutes of the community to see the forthcoming problems or expenses. Because Pedro, I really think some communities, which are not all full of Airbnb or touristic apartments, might allow to increase up to 20%, which is what the law now allows. And I think most of the communities, Pedro, are going to go for it, unless there is a new law that gives authorization for the community to prohibit this kind of touristic rentals. They will never be able to prohibit long-term rentals or short-term rentals, but probably the touristic is what is creating the issue here. Pedro, any other questions you identify here? Well, mortgages. Art was asking about mortgages.
I can see there is a question by Claire. Some views on properties in Malaga. In January this year, and the estate agents warned about residential communities increasingly forbidden holiday renting, and I understood that this could not be applied retrospectively, to be careful when purchases that you can choose. That's right, it cannot be done retrospectively, but can be done in case all the owners, and when I mean all the owners, it means also the property that you buy or the owner that you are buying through also agrees on that. So this I would say is very difficult. That you need to have all the owners, and if you have a license, obviously you will say no. And but
Pedro, the way the law says now, if the statutes do not prohibit any economic activity, nobody so far could prohibit the touristic. So if you have a license, and then the bylaws.
That's correct. You have a license. That is the rules that you need to fulfill the requirements. Obviously, there's rules of the community, but also rules of the municipality.
Okay. Now, eventually, this is what we're thinking here, Claire. If they change the law and they allow the communities to prohibit that, that's something that could happen afterwards. But Pedro, if they already have a license, we are going to have a conflict, because the town hall will allow the activity, But I think this is like a building license. A building license is granted as long as you perform any laws, any civil laws. So I think the town hall will grant a license as long as the community allows you to do. So it's two different things. The town hall might allow it because it's an urbanistic thing, but the community might or might not allow. This is a civil regime. But those of you who have a villa, this will never happen. I mean, you don't need community in a villa. A villa is just you. So
yeah, but this is the tricky point. I mean, obviously, this that we said. Now, in order to reject now a community of owners that they have some people that has licenses, has a tourist apartments that are making some business, can the community now reject and say, no, you are forbidden to rent it unless everyone agrees? So it means that also the apartments or the flats or the owners that have flats also agrees in against them to do that. Well, in that case will happen, but if not, will not happen. Will be able to be increase the fees of those at maximum of 20% of the community fees if 3/5 of the owners, not the ones who attend the general meetings. I mean, 3/5 of the total owners, they need to vote in favor to increase the fees of those ones who have licenses and are making business with the touristic license.
But Pedro, do you think for those who already have a town hall license, and now this law comes into force, and they will prohibit they will allow the community to prohibit that activity, but you already have a license. Do you think the community, even though you already have an existing license, could say, I'm sorry, we as a community, we do not let you do it? What do you think?
No. This is what you're saying. If the rules of a municipality, if the rules of a region says change, if that rules change and says, no, in 5 years' time, whenever you expire your license, you will not have a right to have a license anymore, for example. Then will expire. Or the rule says, okay, well, it will be changed and it will be agreed, but at this time, the rules as it is right now, if you have a license or if you have a right to have a license, you apply for a license, you are given a license. The rules of the community are what they are, and this is what I'm saying. I mean, in order to, if it's not forbidden from the beginning because it has not been agreed, then I don't think will happen. I mean, it's been tried by many communities, and there are many resolutions right now in the courts. Well, some of them, and that has been given a negative answer to the community of owners. They wanted to reject those touristic license or those apartments. What has been agreed, and I don't think there is no dispute on that, is about the 20% increase.
No, the issue is not about the 20%. The issue is whether they could prohibit. You already have a touristic
in my
license.
opinion, cannot unless everyone agrees. Everyone is 100% of owners agrees that.
If you already have a license.
If the municipality says that it's going to expire, it will expire. I mean, that's for sure. Or if the municipality says in 10 years' time, it will be forbidden. Then in 10 years' time, it will be forbidden. But that's the point.
Right. Well, basically here, the bottom line is you could buy a property in Spain in a safe way, do investment, and try to see what type of model you're going to use. Touristic, short-term, long-term. And it's important you know all the three possible scenarios. At the moment, it is you need to check with your town hall how much time they will grant that license for, and whether you have any agreement with the community or disagreement in the community about it. It's a business model, and the good thing and the positive thing is the community could never control the short term and the long term. They could control the activity, which is the economic activity, which is the touristic, which is what the neighbors are complaining about, the noise, and they might even increase 20% of your existing community fees. Okay, Pedro, thank you very much. If you could please put your email here, and if they ever want to contact you or even myself, we're happy to do so. We are just stopping the webinars for the summer. We are leaving you in peace here until probably next September. But please feel free if you want to send us any questions in the future about further topics. We will be doing much more in the future. Well, thank you for your joining us, for your loyalty. Thank you for listening to us. And Pedro, yeah.
Thank you. Let me just answer one of the latest questions. I think I did answer to Claire, but she already wrote something. Just a minute. She says, if you own a property and vote against excluding tourist letting, then excluding tourist letting, there is no 100% unanimous agreement. The danger is the conveyancing period. You could start buying a property where tourist rentals are allowed, but in the interim, the community votes 100%. Well, that is something that you need to, this is why it's important to have a due diligence, to have an independent lawyer. You instruct your lawyer to check specifically this, because you will not buy the property unless you have a right in order to start this kind of business. And obviously it needs to be checked. It needs to be checked with the community of owners. It needs to be included in the contract that the seller has not, there is no agreement, there is no AGM, there is no in the near future before the completion is done that he's going to be there, and in case that is done, he will have to reject them. Obviously, you buy it with that condition that you need to include that in the contract in order to buy with safe in this case.
Okay.
Okay.
All right then. Okay, Pedro,
Thank
have
you.
a great summer.
Thank you, everyone.
See you very
Great summer.
soon.
Thank
Okay.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. See you soon. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. I pass it on to Juanfran now, just giving you some tips on buying a property in Spain. Over to you, Juanfran.
Buying a property in Spain. There are many reasons to purchase a property in Spain. The climate, the food, the culture, or simply to enjoy life. If you already see yourself buying the house of your dreams in the Mediterranean, it is important to be cautious and follow a series of steps. First, prepare a budget and take into account all the possible expenses. Remember to add transfer tax or VAT to the sale price, as well as legal fees, notary fees, and land registry fees. And even if it was love at first sight, do not rush or sign anything. The most important thing, especially if you're not yet a Spanish resident, is to hire an independent lawyer, a specialist who speaks your language and solely defends your interests. Together, you can review the characteristics of the house, should it have pending charges, negotiate a mortgage with the banks, and you will always be up to date throughout the whole process. But most importantly, fall in love with your property and do things by the book. Your new life starts there. Pellicer and Heredia, international lawyers.